Hello everyone and welcome to today's Mondaq webinar in association with Nexdigm. My name is Dan Sampaio and it's my pleasure to open today's session and introduce you to Kartik Nagarajan. Kartik leads global sales for business services at Nexdigm. He is also responsible for operations and related services for business consulting, supply chain and data analytics practice. Welcome Kartik, and over to you.
Thank you, Dan. We are pleased to help deliver an engaging discussion on supply chain collaboration today. We do recognize your time is valuable, and we aim to conclude the entire session within the next 45 to 60 minutes. I'd like to take a moment to welcome our distinguished panel, Abby Pratt from Advamed, Murugan Pugalenthi from Johnson & Johnson, Steve Younts from Nexdigm, and Ramakrishnan Kashinathan, better known as Ramki from Nexdigm as well. I will provide an overview and my keynotes on the topic today. Once it's done, I'll then invite my colleague, Marc Lessem, to moderate our expert panel discussion. But before we begin, please note that you're all in listen-only mode. If you have any questions, please share them with us through our question box on the control panel. We'll then address them towards the end of our discussion or in writing if the time permits. So let's get started. The ongoing pandemic and dynamic geopolitical situation, such as the Ukraine war, have given rise to a new reality in the form of supply chain disruption. In the face of this reality, the global chain supply leaders are fighting on multiple fronts. They're expected not only to keep up the operations running, but also manage the escalating cost and simultaneously build long-term resiliency. According to a recent study, increasing supply chain resiliency is one of the major goals for global leaders. And to achieve this goal, some of the steps global leaders have taken are dual or multi-sourcing of critical raw materials to eliminate dependency on a single supplier, thereby mitigating the risk of supply chain disruption, increasing inventory of critical products, nearshoring and increasing supplier base along with regionalizing supply chains. And as a response strategy, some of the methods organization can look into for managing the supply chain in such a dynamic environment are by eliminating the dependency on single supplier. As mentioned in the previous slide, it is crucial to avoid relying on a single source or a single region in order to reduce single point of failure. Companies can now leverage information technology to gain real-time visibility, predict outcomes, and quickly prepare responses accordingly. What is critical is that the clients and suppliers should work as one cohesive enterprise through collaboration. We'll discuss the supply chain collaboration with the customers and suppliers further in the coming slides and also take the sourcing functions case to explore it further. Closer relationship between organizations and suppliers creates significant value and help supply chains become more resilient. Some of the recommended practices for collaborating with the partners and suppliers include leadership involvement and support for cooperation on both the sides so that they work as one cohesive unit. There should be proactive information sharing and providing real-time visibility of demand and supply chains across the involved parties so that we can take cognizance of what's going to come in the future. Financial risk and rewards in various areas such as capacity investments, inventory building, and cost reduction initiative need to be shared between both the parties. Both of the entity involved should plan the entire end-to-end journey together and invest therefore in innovation and technology, in process and systems. Moving on to the supply collaboration. Procurement sourcing is one of the supply chain functions that has faced a lot of heat with the supply chain disruption resulting in plants running idle in need of raw materials. It has also brought a shift towards collaboration with trusted suppliers in the form of altering the share of business among many suppliers for short-term gains to a future-ready more collaboration for long-term benefits of the trusted suppliers. The medium of sharing information between the buyer and the supplier with investments have shifted to a digital age. More emphasis has now been put on building relationship and trust between the buyers and suppliers, as well as a very close engagement with the supplier in quality evolution. Talking about resiliency, procurement department is stretched and stretched, which results in the burnout and attrition in sourcing teams, including the category managers. In this situation, a third-party resource team can now help alleviate the situation by working as your extended team of category managers and supporting them with the tactical and operating activity that consume a lot of bandwidth, so that now a category managers can concentrate on their core task of planning category strategy and managing the relationship. A third-party service provider can now support creating resiliency in the face of attrition. For instance, enabling the quick transition to a new category managers in case of attrition with the knowledge of category and supply data, and releasing the bandwidth for non-strategic but very essential tasks of category managers to take up bigger portfolios. By utilizing analytics and project manual expertise, a third-party resource also assists in procurement professionals in prioritizing, in planning, and implementing strategic initiatives related to cost efficiency, resiliency, etc. So with that, I now call upon my colleague, Marc Lessem, to moderate the panel. Marc leads the efforts to enhance the presence of Nexdigm in North America, a strategically important market for Nexdigm. In his 30 years experience, Marc has led multiple senior management roles in general management, operations, marketing, sales, and finance. Over to you, Marc.
Thank you very much, Kartik. I do appreciate that insightful presentation and really setting the context for today's panel discussion. Now, normally I'm that guy and I forget to turn off my mute button. So let me invite all the panelists not to be that guy and remove the mute button. We can move forward. No doubt that we are all in a very well documented time of supply chain turbulence. To share their thoughts, we've been very fortunate to assemble a very diverse panel who have the credentials to offer their guidance, and it's my privilege to now introduce them. You'll certainly find more information on them in their individual LinkedIn profiles. Abby is AdvaMed's lead in a number of markets to include India, Russia, and the Middle East. In addition, since March of 2020, which is a date near and dear to everybody, she's led the association's COVID-19 supply chain work, supporting the medtech industry's efforts to ramp up production and navigate the critical supply shortages and transportation disruptions. Murugan has experience in pharma, consumer goods, manufacturing, and the high technology sectors. His expertise crosses supply chain, procurement, sales operations, data science and analytics, and digital functions. He's currently operating as a director for global procurement at J&J, where he is responsible for data science and digital transformation for global sourcing and procurement. Steve is an operations professional and a leader in global supply chain management with nearly 4 decades of experience. He has extensive background in operations management across the US and other geographies. Steve has successfully built high-performance teams, driven cost savings, and established robust long-term operational strategies. And finally, Ramki has nearly 3 decades of experience himself. He's recognized for global purchasing and supply chain management in very turbulent environments. His strong execution focus has helped deliver strategic intents with change management excellence. I'd like to welcome all 4 of you today and start off with a question to Steve. Steve, supply chain volatility, there's something we haven't heard lately. Both on the demand side and the supply side seems to be today's norm. How does the reality of this volatility impact supply chain planning and management?
Thanks, Mark, and that's a very good question, obviously, at this point. And my thoughts on that are that the global pandemic has certainly emphasized that uncertainty that partners in the supply chain have to contend with. And despite efforts moving towards more and more enhanced planning systems for both forecasting and supply planning, stuff still happens. And clearly during the pandemic, some major stuff happened. What is really critical at this point in supply chain management planning systems is agility and the ability to realign supply and demand during the execution process of our planning cycles and to manage this volatility of demand and supply. The sooner the deviations from the plans are detected, the sooner that options can be explored to resolve them. And obviously, the greater the delay in addressing oversupply or undersupply, the greater the impact is to cost to resolve that and potential impacts to negative customer satisfaction. So supply chain planning cycles have grown steadily shorter. And I remember early in my career where we used to go with, 3-month blocks of planning and you couldn't change the schedules and all that kind of stuff. Well, that's clearly out the window at this point. So I think the biggest point is that what maybe was a monthly cycle has clearly been reduced to weekly to daily, and continuous planning almost, if you will, with this planning embedded in our execution processes. Ideally, supply disruptions and demand disruptions are predicted before they happen, and visibility into your suppliers' processes and production status is really needed. So therefore, cultivating trusted supplier relationships is necessary so that bad news can be delivered as quickly as possible. For most companies, detecting deviations from a forecast early on can be very difficult. And we all know that mix issues in inventory at a store level or at a distribution level can lead to lost sales. And demand sensing software that can detect early on deviations from a plan is absolutely critical at this point in our history. When disruptions and deviations do occur, information is critical to be able to assess the impact of these deviations and arrive at possible solutions. And automating that detection and bringing that data forward is really important so that all of management knows what is occurring in real time. Leading organizations are able to prioritize their list of disruptions and able to focus resources accordingly so that the biggest bang for the buck is realized in addressing these issues. They can address multiple options, they can collaborate, and they can compare other options and solutions to get at addressing those types of problems, and can do it in a way that maximizes profits, lowers costs, and improves customer satisfaction. These same leading edge companies are investing in artificial intelligence and machine learning so that when these events happen repeatedly, they're able to then come up with a database then of how those things should be addressed. So analyzing outcomes and building recommendations for future occurrences like that. So I think in summary, all businesses need to pursue a variety of initiatives to improve demand and supply alignment agility. This agility is good not only for the ongoing business, but is necessary when you encounter times of major disruptions.
Steve, very comprehensive answer. I appreciate that. I took a couple notes here, and I think it's going to permeate this session, and that is responsiveness, trust with your suppliers, and data availability, information exchange, and transparency. So you touched on some topics I know we're going to revisit. I appreciate that. To the audience, before I turn my attention to Abby, let me remind you to go ahead and submit any questions you might have through the technology provided, and we'll be sure to address those questions towards the end of the session as well. Abby, let's turn to you, if you will. You're a representative of a very established medical device association, and you've observed companies struggling to adapt their supply chains to this new reality during COVID and disruptions due to the geopolitical situations like what we're facing in Ukraine. What are some of the key supply chain challenges that companies specifically in the healthcare space face, and how might those challenges differ perhaps from other industries?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks so much, Mark, and thanks again for having me here today and to represent the medical devices industry. I'd first say that it's been an evolution and a dynamic landscape for our industry. I would say in the initial days of the pandemic, the supply chain disruptions hitting healthcare were confined to the pandemic itself and the surge in demand for certain medical supplies and equipment. So it was really in those narrow spaces of like respiratory care and ventilators, PPE, diagnostics tests, because everyone around the world wanted the same things at the same time. So in a sense, because it was narrowly defined in that space, I would say it was less complicated than things are today. And I would say perhaps the last year and a half or so, in fact, that chart that Kartik showed kind of resonated with me, or with the pickup of the disruptions after the surge in disruptions really resonates with us. But basically, since early 2021, I would say the nature and magnitude of supply chain disruptions hitting our industry have changed quite a bit. And really what we're seeing is industry-wide disruptions across a variety of different areas, particularly when it comes to the availability of raw materials, components, and input. And then on the transportation front, it's been, we can talk about this more later, but incredibly challenging. And I think for us in particular, we're competing with other sectors for these raw materials, inputs, parts, and components. And also on the transportation side, we're competing for space. And healthcare, well, we would argue, is a pretty important industry and sector. People really can't wait for these products. We don't have the size, scale, and market share of some other sort of manufactured goods. And just an example of some of those products that we've really struggled with over the past year and a half are, one, semiconductors, computer chips, and the related parts and components. That's been incredibly challenging to our industry. Resins and polymers and plastics, and that can be traced back to the Texas winter storm of 2020. Tyvek by DuPont, it's a kind of medical grade packaging that also has other uses in housing and industrial use. And then different types of glass and plastic tubing and vials. And this is just a couple, there's more, but there's a lot of these acute shortages of raw materials and inputs that again go into other products. So we're competing with other sectors and then navigating all the shortages and disruptions of these upstream products. And the causes are varied. Some of it stem back to the pandemic and all the disruption and dislocation that created, but it's also on top of the pandemic, you've had severe weather events that have sort of gummed up the works. You've had changes in purchasing patterns that were sort of spurred on by the pandemic, the stay-at-home economy, and the huge uptick in purchases of home goods and appliances and officeware. And then you still have those continued COVID outbreaks around the world, particularly in China, where they have the zero COVID policy, which has really created a lot of challenges. And as you mentioned, Mark, the war with Ukraine, which is, triggered an energy crisis in Europe. So all of these different layers upon layers, which have been obviously exacerbated by the pandemic, have made things incredibly challenging. And finally, I don't think anyone needs to be reminded of this, but just the inflationary pressures that all sectors and industries are facing have been really challenging for healthcare. Most medical device companies have long-term contracts with their customers' hospitals, so they're going to be forced to absorb those additional costs. So that too is something that just continues to be a challenge and doesn't show any signs of letting up anytime soon.
Yeah, it's interesting coming from the healthcare sector myself. When the COVID first hit, I remember there being a lot of competition amongst the healthcare suppliers for PPE as an example. And now you broaden that because now you're competing against the automotive industry and others for chips. And I'm simplifying, but I see where it becomes a bigger global issue for you. Thank you for the work you do. It also validates the need for data. So I'm going to use that as a nice segue to go over to Murugan. At NJ, I happen to know you use analytics, and it's very commonplace, Murugan. So in fact, I know it's also a particular passion of yours. So I'd love your perspective on how the business demands for analytics and technology adoption have changed from pre-COVID days and perhaps the related impact on supplier collaboration.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and then I think Steve and Abby has set the ground very solid for this topic, right? And thanks for having me here. So I just want to kind of start the question on what is the need or what is the demand from analytics and technology, right? I would say every business is a data business currently. Right? That's how I see this world is moving towards. And need for technology analytics, I would split into 3 areas, which is really very high at this point in time. One, I would say that the leadership is supply chain leadership is looking forward for the role of data analytics and technology in the profitable growth, right? And I will do a little bit of a deep dive into it as well. When I say profitable growth, there are 2 elements to it, right? How data and analytics going to help in this space, right? One is on the external things which people have already talked about it, like inflation, the commodity price, demand softening. There is huge amount of things are happening, right? The leadership is looking forward for data and analytics, how we can help on this external kind of challenges what we are going through. That's one. And internal, if you look at from a profitable growth, but an internal point of view, people are getting exposed to things like automation, exception management, cognitive decision making, how machines can make decisions on behalf of human. It is not only machines replacing human task, but now people are talking about machines replacing human decision making, right? So these are all the things what leadership is really looking for forward to help, looking forward for the help of data and technology to drive the profitable growth. That's one. And the second thing is what we again people have talked about it. There are a huge amount of disruptions the world what we are going through it. So how data and analytics and technology can help on risk sensing and resiliency building. That's been a very big topic, and it used to be just a sort of a lip service before COVID. I take that because I worked in different organizations, I've seen it has all been a lip service, but now post COVID, people have started realizing that this should happen, and data technology analytics, the role is very huge, and there's a huge demand in that space. The last one, which is the third one, we talk about this trade-off making, right? We talked about the lot of trade-off, right? The inventory, cost, customer service, resiliency. So what is our sweet spot, right? Where organizations, I think Steve talked about the planning cycles are becoming from months to weeks to days, right? So what is that trade-off, right? So these 3 areas, one is profitable growth, second is the risk sensing and resiliency building, the third thing is the trade-off decision making, are 3 big demand areas. And I want to give you just at a high level one example on each, right? In profitable growth, we are companies started working on things like inflation modeling, inflation monitoring, things around demand shaping, things around that, right? That kind of helps in the profitable growth area. The second thing is me being part of the supply chain and part of the procurement, and we have hundreds and thousands of suppliers, right? And we have very less visibility to their risk, right? What sort of risk they are exposed to, etc. And we are working on hugely on supplier risk sensing related area, huge internal external data, technology involvement kind of included in that, right? The last one on the trade-off making, we kind of every company and including us, right? We are working on how do we really even look at the forecasting process given all the disruptions which are happening, right? If I take the same data of COVID impacted data and then I do a forecasting, it's going to be a garbage in, garbage out, right? How am I going to do a more cognitive sensing of removing these event implications and automatically, right? And I think Abhi talked about the medical tech world, and where we have millions of configurations and products, right? So it is a manually impossible thing without machine. It is not possible, right? So how are we going to really bring in those intelligence, and then thereby doing a better forecasting is an example of a better decision making, which will drive reduction in inventory, improving customer service level, etc. So that's the 3 examples kind of aligned to the profitable growth, risk sensing, and the trade-off decision making. Steve, Mark.
Thank you, Murugan. Already twice now in the very first few questions, we find out how quickly and how short the planning cycles are getting, from months to days to weeks to days. So that's a duplication there. I appreciate that. The trade-off theme is going to come throughout, and I appreciate the examples you shared as well. Ramki, you've been terribly patient. Thank you for waiting for me. I do want to address, maybe because you waited so long, I'll have a two-part question for you. How's that? And,
okay.
And as I think about it, Ramki, maybe Murugan and Steve, I think I'm going to follow with the same questions to you. So here we go, Ramki. Given the digital transformation drive and that it does drive collaboration, what is your position on if companies are doing this the right way? So that'd be part one of this question. And then how can the companies sort of ensure that the digital initiatives give the desired results, especially with, as Murugan just pointed out and as AB mentioned, the spiraling costs and perhaps a likely economic downturn in the near future?
I'm sure, I was always sure that you will come to the digital question, because you can't escape digital in supply chain because they have become intertwined. But I would like to ask you a question. One, the question is that in North American businesses, how much percentage do you think is data driven? How many businesses think that they are data driven in their management? What is your guess?
My guess is more people think they're data driven than the facts will show. And so I'm going to say that 60% of the organizations say they're data driven, but it might be half of that.
So you're pretty close. Actually, there was a survey done by New Vantage Partners, and they reported only 25% of organizations and leaders believe that their organization is data driven. So just to give a perspective. And if you see an article in HBR, Harvard Business Review in February 22, just this year, they have a full article written on why is it so difficult to become data driven? Why an organization struggles to become data driven? Why I'm putting this point is that when we say digital for supply chain guys, I'm not talking about social media, other connects and etc. For supply chain guys, the expectation is digital should drive a data-driven culture, because you'll have to make decisions based on data. But if the organizations believe that only 25% are driven by data, so what is the bottleneck? Is it availability of data, or is it the culture? So we'll have to address that part. So to flip your question, I think digital enabling collaboration is more how the IT companies present themselves. But I feel that the leadership should drive collaboration to actually make digital a success. To give a perspective, again, digital transformation globally is a $600 billion market. And US spends $125 billion now this year. And it is expected to grow at 20%, both global as well as US. So it is going to become $3,500 billion globally, and US is going to become $600 billion. So what does it mean? This means most companies are going to become technology companies. Means that if so much of money is going to go into digital and technology, the expectation is that everybody is going to be interacting with digital. I take this case of automotive, for example, in 1990s, probably about 70% of the automotive or the car was mechanical. If you see today, the amount of electronics and electrical parts inside a car far outweighs the mechanical parts. So in terms of value, it is shifted significantly. So similar transformation is happening in all business, because once you invest so much in digital, you are changing your whole business models and you are going to run the organization very differently. But reality is that I feel that if you spend $1 billion, $150 million is going away, which is not visible to most, because those projects fail. And why do those projects fail? If you really analyze it, it is because within the organization collaboration is lacking, for one, because each silo tries to protect their boundaries and try to sub-optimize the overall digital intent. So which means that you build redundancy, you try to duplicate efforts, because somebody tries to avoid work for me, don't try and increase work for me. And so that sort of political dynamics happen. So I think the other way, collaboration should be the foundation on which the digital transformation should rest. not digital enabling collaboration. I think that is a myth. Digital enabling collaboration is a myth. If there is no collaboration in the organization, that is not going to improve collaboration. So you will have to drive collaboration as a leadership drive to build that, not within the organization. Just I'm saying within the organization is a struggle for a lot of companies. I'm saying beyond is next. Beyond is next journey where people talk about extended enterprise, but reality is that it doesn't come automatically. If you see a Korean or a Japanese culture, it comes automatically because the supplier interface, the trust, the collaboration is automatic. But when it comes to other cultures, it's a difficult thing. So you need to drive that change to get full benefits of digital. That is point number one. Second thing, you talked about the economic cycle and what we should do. I always say there are 3 C's when there is a recession which happens. First is customer. Get more close to customer. I say that is the first C, and that is the only way to ensure that you stay alive during recession. The second thing is cost. Keep a hold on the cost and drive the cost down because you cannot afford. The last one is cash. But now I add the 4th C, which is collaboration. The 4th C, because your digital investment is not going to stop. It is already committed. You may slow down 2 quarters, but reality is that once you have put in your money, you will have to get the benefit out of it. So you need to drive that. And so therefore you need to ensure that the 4th C, which is the collaboration, is also being driven by the leadership and get the maximum benefit out. So where do companies fail? I think what should companies do? I personally think when you're doing your digital frame, which is the outside frame, you need to talk to suppliers and customers and get the alignment because you are not anymore a standalone organization. Digital is connected. And so you need to be willing to work with customers and suppliers, which means you need to understand, treat them as stakeholders and understand what they need and build it in your digital drive. That is one. Second thing is the empowerment of employees, because when the digital happens, a lot of things, decisions made at vice president level gets down to probably the customer service executive or the supply chain planner level. So you need to empower employees, asking them to make decisions. I know companies which have done the transformation and have struggled with the empowerment part, and that slows down the digital benefit. The last one is digital is going to be a living and dynamically adjusting to what are the new realities which happen, which means that you will have to ensure that this particular I would not call it an investment, this transformation ongoing should be adjusted to the new realities and driven with leadership top-down directive. And I say that there are companies which say, oh, I will try to too much centralize the digital transformation, give it decentralized. Both I have seen success and failures. The reality is that you need to adjust to the realities and ensure implementation of the digital. Only then you get maximum benefit. That is my view of digital transformation.
Well, thank you for a couple of things. Thank you for giving me a quiz. Thank you for the very keen insight and for flipping the question the other way. And I think you brought up leadership, certainly, and I was going to revisit that later, and I certainly will, but the commitment of leadership being important. I want to give Murugan an opportunity, and then Steve, to also comment on this question, and that's the need for digital transformation and how to go about it to get to maximum benefits. Just as a little bit of a reminder, Murugan, if you care to comment or adding anything to Ramki had to say.
Definitely, Mark. So a few pointers just to add on to what Ramki is saying. That first of all, I want to challenge even people calling us a digital transformation, right? And I found one of the leading Indian organization calling this as business transformation enabled by digital, right? It is what is happening with pushing digital as a savior in the industry. I think it is setting a huge amount of expectation, and it is leading to a failure. And plus, from a design thinking principle also, I feel that we should fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. And I found organization, IT organization, digital data science organization going and selling process mining and just taking digital twins, and versus we need to talk about the problem, what problem these digital technologies are going to solve, right? That's one point. And these problems, the collaboration, the whatever Ramki has talked about, one nuance I want to bring in is this differs between a digital first organization and a non-digital first organization. Maybe the digital first organization is what Ramki qualified as the 25%, and the 75% of the people is still struggling, right, with understanding. For them, even Excel is a digital transformation, right? So I want to bring that difference. And then challenges, right? When you talk about more on the challenges piece, the cost of data, right, killing many projects. Ramki touched upon the executive education, which is big in this case, right? And digital investments, making even benefit cases and tracking the benefit is a very big challenge. That's what I've been seeing. The last one is around even lead time of implementations, the organization patience, the reorg, etc. I think there are quite a bit of a challenges what we are going through beyond over and above the collaboration. Now, quickly, what helps us in achieving the desired results, right? Like I said, fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. That's one. But again, there are two areas. So one is a strategical view, and second is a tactical view. Strategical view, I think any digital investments and what we are going through should have a very strong leadership support, commitment, and a governance, right? And they should attach right priority, and they should consider this as a long-term but not having a knee-jerk reactions, right? So that's one from a strategical perspective. The second one, again, Ramki talked about it. It is what I call as a DQ, digital quotient of the organization. It's very, very important because that will lead to the adoption. If you don't empower people, all your investments, they will not adapt. If they don't adapt, there is no value or realization. If there is no realization, that defeats the trust in the organization. So the DQ, digital quotient building, is a very, very important thing. The third one from a strategic perspective is showing the quick wins, right? And we adapted something called procurement garage. We do projects in 90 days, right? So within our J&J ecosystem, though it's a big monster system, but we do it in 90 days. Take the learning and move on, right? Sort of a quick wins demonstration is a very, very important one from a strategical perspective. And from a tactical perspective, I think we should talk about, whenever we do this digital investments, etc., keep it no human touch, or a less human touch is very, very important. And second thing could be, there are a lot of innovations which are coming around to keep the cost low. For every initiatives is an important thing. The last one, which is to the theme, collaboration, right? There are a lot of advanced methodologies and the frameworks like agile teams, or the high performance team, or the squad. There have been, every organizations are using different words, but need to live to the reality, really live to those nuances is going to help us in winning this game. Otherwise, this is going to be a big challenge to prove the value to the organization.
Thank you, Murugan. Steve, anything to add to what Ramki and Murugan had to say here?
No, Ramki and Murugan make very, very good points, and I just have some thoughts that kind of echo a lot of what they said. But digital transformation projects in any organization really should have a well thought out strategy with clear business objectives and a clear path for success. And with the stakeholders internally, the business really, first of all, needs to define the requirements of what are we trying to achieve, what does success look like, what challenges are we trying to solve, and what is driving the change. Not having a collaborative strategy with these types of specific goals can lead to a number of problems, such as buying expensive software that doesn't integrate properly with existing technology. The team doesn't like it, therefore they don't use it. Different teams using different tools for the same thing. A specific need that existed in the organization for transformation was not heard. Solving symptoms of problems rather than the problem itself, and buying software that solves the wrong problem. Yeah. So, when these types of situations for digital transformation, take the time to create a direction for the company and answer the question of how does the transformation serve this vision. So the point is, the process of transformation should have an overarching business goal identified in collaboration with all of your key stakeholders.
A lot to unpack from the three of you there. Thank you. Abby, I'm going to come to you with the first with the first audience question, and it's what kind of strategies are companies in the healthcare space adopting to address supply chain challenges?
Thanks, Mark. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Well, one thing, and this is a little bit of a shameless plug for AdvaMed, but our companies have definitely leveraged our organization and the platform to come together and talk about the challenges they're facing, because it's just such a unique time and unprecedented, and it really resonated with me about the compressed planning schedules that people are seeing. So just having the ability for companies to come together under the AdvaMed umbrella to talk about what kind of shortages are they experiencing, what events have come up that are causing delays. I think that information sharing has been very helpful. And then another thing that we've observed and heard from our member companies, and this sounds rather simplistic, but what we really observed is that companies are stepping up their communication with their suppliers. And so they're forging relationships deeper into their supply chain and getting to know as many people they can at every level. They used to keep those relationships more at arm's length and sort of rely on the existing frameworks that things would just get done. And now they're not taking that for granted. They're literally picking up the phone and having conversations. And they're also making sure that every supplier up and down the chain knows that a given product, part, component is going into a life-saving medical device. And sometimes when they just simply make that case or communicate that fact, then they're able to get the attention that they need or speed things up or have things improve. And so we just find that sort of human-to-human contact and coordination in those relationships is just really critical. And companies have also leveraged AdvaMed. We've reached out to suppliers. We've also been working with terminal authorities and port operators around expediting the offloading and transport of medical equipment. And we reached out to suppliers to urge them to prioritize products in the healthcare space. And as I mentioned earlier, I think this is needed, having an organization like AdvaMed getting help from the federal government, because we're such a small slice of many of the markets that we're trying to tap into. So for semiconductors, for example, we're only 1% of the semiconductor market. So we're not going to move things as well as, say, like the auto companies or the home appliance companies, because we just don't have the size contracts and the market share that they do. Also, manufacturers are, as we saw in the first few slides, they're diversifying their suppliers. They're moving from single source to dual source or to multiple source. They're working on their inventories. But I would say one thing that's unique to healthcare is that we're such a highly regulated industry that you really can't as easily swap out parts, components, or suppliers. That could trigger months, if not years, of hurdles in terms of regulations and getting those changes validated and certified with the FDA or whatever regulatory authority you're working with in a given country. So that in and of itself is a challenge, that you can't just sort of, oh, I don't have this part, so I'm going to shift over to this supplier to get it. Any kind of change triggers a commensurate regulatory hurdle. That's just some of the things that companies have been doing, but I think they'll have to continue to kind of think through different solutions.
Yeah, by the way, there are no shameless plugs, so quite all right. And I would say the irony of seeking more human-to-human contact on a digital webinar platform is not lost on me. So it's a very interesting dichotomy there. Murugan, let's turn to you, because the next question really, it begins with a presumption on my part, and that is that the benefits to companies are limited if they're innovating or leveraging technologies in their own silos. So with that in mind, what is a major bottleneck for driving co-innovation practices, and that is companies working alongside key supply chain partners?
No, definitely, it's a good question, Mark. So if I think broadly, right, if you are trying to do within innovation within your supply chain, like it's more of a local optima for me versus if you engage with your partners, it is a global optima. It is what you are trying to do it. And I'm also, in my limited experience, I'm also seeing that the next source, or the next big $1 billion or a next source of growth, innovation, even disruption is with the external supply chain partners, right? Not within yours. Now that's what is happening around us. So what are the bottlenecks, right? So the question is, what is stopping us in terms of doing this? From my experience, right? I kind of look at in few areas, few reasons, right? One being the enterprise focus, right? Or the importance the company associates kind of in their day-to-day firefighting. And first of all, let's fix the internal problems. Then we go to our partners and fixing their problems. So sort of we are always thinking of fixing these things in sequence, right? It should not be sequence. It's a mindset problem, right? We should, if you want to really unlock the value, I think we should work in parallel, and we should do the things like, we should not think that, okay, we are bad at this, why should we go to our partner and asking for them to do it, right? So it should be a parallel processing is something what I feel people are missing the picture. One. The second thing is how deep your partner is embedded into your supply chain, right? For an example, I would say all the bigger corporations are doing a huge amount of outsourcing of external manufacturing, ODMs, IDM, different words, right? Contract manufacturing. So those people are very, very critical for us, right? Versus say an MRO supplier, right? Maintenance operating repair suppliers. Are we expecting same from them? Are we doing the same level of? Are we expecting the same level of collaboration? I think I'm thinking organizations needs to think structurally, more of a segmented way. Which one comes first, and which one is very critical for me to really drive this co-innovation, sharing the data and building a greater collaboration and etc. That's the second point I feel. The third broader thing is every organizations have started doing something like a partner enabled innovation or supplier incorporated innovation, a lot of things, right? There are a lot of good things on concept. Is it in reality? I would really challenge, right? Because this is where the rubber hits the ground, right? People will start talking about what it isn't for them, right? What it isn't for them. What is investment now? How they can put the investment without any fear, right? There are a lot of questions needs to be answered before we just jump into co-innovation mode, right? We need to answer what it isn't for them, and how are we going to share the burden, right? At least at the initial stage, we need to answer that. Otherwise, this is becoming a bottleneck. The last one, which is very important from a digital data perspective. My limited experience, all the supply chain partners are working in a very shared environment. They share the lines, they share the trucks, they share the components, etc. So in a shared environment, the information trustworthiness is a bigger challenge, right? That's becoming a bigger bottleneck. So can I trust this data? Is it for me or is it for the? So it's been a bigger bottleneck in terms of understanding and kind of appreciating the data trustworthiness with the supply chain partners to drive the value creation, co-value creation and co-innovation. Mark.
Thank you, Murugan. Abby, maybe touch on some of the looming challenges and some of the supply chain risks that you foresee in the future. Certainly, you talk to a lot of different manufacturing entities in the healthcare space.
Yeah, Mark, and don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but I do think, there are challenges ahead. And part of it is just sort of the way that the pandemic sort of exacerbated and sort of catalyzed challenges, supply chain challenges that haven't normalized yet. And so we have seen that, for example, the delays at the ports and the container congestion has improved quite a bit, and even spot rates for containers have come down. But I don't think we're necessarily in the clear. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the ongoing war with Ukraine that is triggering an energy crisis in Europe. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out as we go into the winter and more people need fuel at that time. And what are the upstream impacts? We have a lot of contract manufacturers in Germany, for example, that are going to face a real challenge there. Another area I think folks should be on the lookout for, and this is really far upstream, but it could have implications, is efforts in the US and the EU to eradicate forced labor from supply chains. It's really focused on certain regions in China where there's forced labor, but that's going to affect upstream sources and materials such as cotton, materials that go into batteries for electric vehicles, but also medical devices, silica-based products. So as governments clamp down on these types of activities and want to decouple themselves from these sources, that's going to affect all the different manufactured goods that source from these regions. Also, just the growing tensions with the US, China, and Taiwan, any geopolitical instability there is going to affect the rest of the world because it's such a key part of the global manufacturing and production. So I think that's something to watch very closely. And then just, this is nothing new, but it just seems to be getting worse and worse, is the severe weather that we see around the world and, induced by climate change. We're still feeling the effects of the Texas winter storm that happened on the end of 2020. There's still a lot of those petrochemical manufacturers are still trying to work through their backlogs. So we're still feeling the impacts. And now fire season is not just fire season, there are wildfires all year, or hurricane season. So I just think that's another layer on top that companies are going to have to think about and plan for. And then of course, COVID. It does seem like we're in a better place, but it's not over. China still has its zero COVID policy, so lockdowns have economic implications, manufacturing implications. We saw what happened when there were massive lockdowns in Shanghai. That really gummed up a lot of supply chain issues. And then I would just say, finally, just to add onto the list, is at least particularly in healthcare, is the push for more sustainability. For companies and organizations to think about their carbon footprint and their emissions. And there's a real big push in healthcare for us to start looking at and start making commitments around that. So that's going to force supply chain leaders to think about not only what they're sourcing, but how they're sourcing it, where they're sourcing it from, what's the impact, and then there's the whole cost to all of that. And that needs to be balanced, obviously, with quality and timeliness. But anyway, those are just some things on my mind these days, Mark, about potential supply chain considerations.
Thank you, Abby. A time check to the panelists. We have about 4 minutes left, so I've got a couple audience questions. I'm going to go Ramki first because Abby just touched on carbon footprint. So briefly, Ramki, is there anything more that could be done as it relates to logistics and network optimization associated with carbon footprint?
I have 2 points. One is that this logistics network optimization is an ongoing activity. It is not like we have done the optimization and that is it. So we cannot say that it is always work in progress. And it is like Abby says, so many variables which come and impact. And so it is what is okay yesterday is not okay tomorrow. So that is something we'll have to consider. The second thing is that I think there are a lot of interesting startups coming in the area addressing this problem of, for example, there is one company in Germany which offers logistics on call. So means that small and medium enterprises are able to use this company's warehousing and network and all the connected enterprise facilities, and they are able to scale it. And I see that those innovations and those ideas will be driving the logistics and network optimization, because individual companies trying to optimize and trying to react is going to be a very, very slow process, and it is going to be always reactive. And it is like you try and say that now this is the best solution I have come to, and you will never find the best solution remaining as the best solution for more than a year, given the variability in all the elements. The last point I want to say is $1 trillion is spent on North America in logistics, and that is a lot of money. I see that with purely relooking at the process and it is not just about green, it is about also the amount of money going in. I see that there is a lot of opportunities to reduce the footprint as well as the cost, and that is going to be possible again by collaboration. I see that if there is an open-minded collaboration between different stakeholders, then it is possible to optimize the logistics cost and footprint.
Thank you. Steve, audience question to a senior leader. I'm going to point to you now. What more can be done in a senior management role in terms of fostering a collaborative culture? And I don't mean to cut you short, but we're kind of running. So, you're muted, Steve.
I'm that guy you talked about.
You are that guy.
It may seem like common sense, but if it was common, I wouldn't need to mention it. But for an organization's culture to emphasize collaboration, senior leadership has to be behind it. It's like any other aspect of running a corporation. So I would just point out, with the benefit of time here, that senior leadership's got to understand the benefits of this type of collaboration, how it spills throughout the internal organization, and it creates the sort of the skills necessary then to take this collaboration externally and utilize it with your business partners outside the organization. You cannot assume that management knows the benefits of collaboration. So.
All righty, I want to revert back to one of the early themes Kartik brought up, and that's resiliency. Given Murugan a brief moment here to comment on that, because technology, collaboration, leadership commitment that Steve just mentioned, how can all that be used to strengthen resiliency, Murugan?
No, definitely. This is resiliency, risk resiliency is one area where you will bring all the supply chain together, right? Whether it's plan, make, source, deliver, quality, whatever it is, right? End of the day, customer, consumer, the doctor, nurses, patients are waiting for the product, right? It is a theory of constraint or a theory of the strength of the chain depends on, it is on the weakest link, right? So it is a great case. If you want to build a resiliency in your supply chain, I think without collaboration, it's not going to happen, right? And the second thing is, this is a place where you would able to show a lot of art of possible from a data digital perspective. Huge use of unstructured data, graph database, visualization, control tower. There has been a huge amount of innovations and things are happening, which is again leading to deliver the products and customer service level to the end customer. And this could happen only with collaboration, Mark.
And I don't want to end on a Debbie Downer, so I'll give everybody a chance to have a closing remark. But a last question is, with attrition at all-time high levels, Ramki, how can companies manage continuity and create this resilience? And is outsourcing even play a role anymore?
I personally think that outsourcing will play a role in this area, because with hybrid working, people realize that it is not anymore required. People have to be in the same geography to run supply chain. So it has been easier to run that. And having said that, I see that we should not look at outsourcing en masse, but challenge the holy cows and see where the opportunity lies, because strategic thoughts and time available for senior leaders to do the most important things is critical. So if you can do the repetitive task and follow-ups to be outsourced, then that takes away a lot of pressure from those people. And headcount is always a challenge in global organizations. So it is always good to keep this support, because you don't have to worry about replacing them, because that organization ensures the skill is intact and the knowledge is intact. So I see that as a way to say, like software as a service. I see supply chain as a service coming at some point, and there will be only a control tower, and the supply chain core team manages exceptions and makes strategic decisions. Other things at the back end, systems, etc., run by outsourcing. That is the way it will evolve, is my personal take. That will build resilience, because people are able to think about what is going to happen in the future and plan for it.
Thank you. Thank you all. I want to give you each an opportunity to have maybe 10 or 15 seconds if you have any closing remarks. That's not a lot of time, but let's go in order. Abby, Murugan, Steve, and Ramki. Abby? Also muted. I think you're now that guy.
Now I'm that girl. Sorry, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to join you. I've really enjoyed the discussion and learned a lot, and look forward to continuing to navigate this situation with you all.
Thank you. Murugan.
Yeah, again, same. Thanks for providing us an opportunity, and for the audience, the supply chain and digital are the happening place, and I think this is future is here, and looking forward for more learning.
I appreciate your input as well, Steve.
I am very excited about the future of supply chain, and I think, as I said, the agile supply chain planning systems going forward, I think, are the future, and the ability to make decisions faster and react faster is the future.
And thank you, Ramki.
So my final word is that supply chain is not anymore back end. It is actually the core. It brings value to the front, and it is actually running the whole business. So let us treat that function and give the respect to the people who are doing that, because even though they are measured by the misses they make, but it is really a stressful job they do and try and manage it. So I appreciate that, and let us build a collaboration culture top down. I think that is very important to drive that. Then you get maximum benefits.
And thank you. And with that, audience, I want to extend a very heartfelt thank you to everybody, to all of you from around the world who've listened in. Again, to Kartik and Abby and Murugan and Steve and Ramki for sharing their collective expertise. To Mondaq for helping to organize the webinar, and to my colleagues back at Nexdigm for working behind the scenes to make this and every one of our broadcasts so successful. We do invite all of you listening to connect with us and discuss how we can work hand in hand with you and your organization. If you have any questions in line with today's discussion that we were unable to get to due to time constraints, we do welcome that you reach out to us at thinknext@nexdigm.com, and our team will be happy to respond offline. Across the globe, we do think next at Nexdigm, and we invite you to do the same. We welcome your feedback on today's presentation. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.